The dog should never have survived that storm, not with the wind screaming across the Colorado mountains, not with the temperature dropping fast enough to freeze skin in minutes, and definitely not while carrying something so fragile, so impossibly human. At 2:13 a.m., Ethan Cole heard it, 3 faint scratches against his cabin door. Then silence. Out here, silence usually meant safety. Tonight, it felt like a warning. When he opened the door, the cold hit first. Then, he saw her. A German shepherd, trembling but unbroken, eyes locked onto his like she had chosen him. And in her mouth, a bundle. A newborn, barely breathing. But that wasn't the part that made Ethan's blood run cold. It was the look in the dog's eyes. Not fear, not desperation. Purpose. And somewhere beyond the storm, buried deep in the snow, was the reason she had come, along with a truth someone was willing to kill to keep hidden. The storm had been building for hours. High in the Colorado backcountry, wind carved through the mountains like a living thing, restless, relentless, unforgiving. Snow fell thick and heavy, swallowing sound, erasing tracks, turning the world into something distant and unreal. Inside a small wooden cabin perched against the slope, Ethan Cole sat alone. Ethan Cole was a man who looked like he had once belonged to motion, not stillness. At 42, he stood tall at just over 6 feet, with a broad, athletic frame that had not yet forgotten its strength. His dark brown hair was cut short, practical, streaked faintly with gray at the temples. A thin scar ran along his left jawline, pale against weathered skin, a quiet reminder of a life he no longer spoke about. His eyes, steel gray, were sharp, observant, but distant, as if always measuring something beyond the present moment. Years ago, Ethan had been a search and rescue helicopter pilot, the kind of man who flew into storms instead of away from them. That ended the night his aircraft went down during a blizzard rescue mission. He survived. His crew did not. Since then, silence had become his refuge. The cabin reflected that choice. Sparse, functional. No photographs, no unnecessary objects. Just a wood stove, a table, a chair, and the routines that filled his days. Chopping wood, repairing tools, maintaining the fragile line between survival and isolation. That night, he sat near the stove, a mug of coffee cooling in his hands, listening to the wind press against the walls. Then he heard it. A faint sound, not the wind, something softer, irregular. Ethan didn't move at first. His body reacted before his mind did, shoulders tightening slightly, breath slowing, senses sharpening. Old instincts didn't fade, they just waited. The sound came again. A scratch, then another. 3 short, uneven scrapes against the wood of his door, and then nothing. Silence returned, heavier than before. Ethan set the mug down slowly. He stood, his movements controlled, deliberate. Each step toward the door placed with quiet precision, as if the storm outside could hear him. He stopped just short of the handle. Listened. Nothing. His hand rested on the cold metal. For a brief second, something unfamiliar passed through him. Not fear, but hesitation. It had been years since anyone or anything had come looking for him. Then he opened the door. The wind rushed in immediately, sharp and biting, carrying with it the scent of pine and snow. And then he saw her. A German shepherd stood on the porch. She was large, lean, and powerful despite the storm. Her coat, black and tan, was thick but matted with snow and ice. Her body trembled, but her stance remained steady, grounded. Her ears were alert, her gaze fixed directly on Ethan with an intensity that felt almost human. This was not a stray. This was a working dog. Even in the chaos of the storm, there was discipline in the way she held herself. Purpose. Ethan's eyes dropped. And then he saw what she carried, a bundle, wrapped in a thin, worn blanket, clutched carefully in her mouth. A sound escaped it, small, fragile, a cry. Ethan froze. For a moment, his mind rejected what his eyes were telling him. Nothing about this made sense. Dogs did not bring children to doors, not in storms like this, not in the middle of nowhere. And yet, the cry came again, weak, fading. Behind the mother dog, pressed close to her hind leg, stood a puppy. He was small, barely a few months old, his fur lighter, softer. His body shook uncontrollably, not just from the cold, but from uncertainty. His eyes darted between Ethan and the mother, searching, learning, afraid, but trusting. Ethan exhaled slowly. The world narrowed. Training took over. He stepped aside. "Inside," he said quietly. The dog did not hesitate. She moved forward with controlled urgency, placing the bundle gently on the wooden floor just inside the cabin before stepping back. Not retreating, positioning between Ethan and the puppy. Protective, not aggressive. Watching, always watching. Ethan dropped to one knee. Carefully, he reached for the bundle. Inside was a newborn. The baby's skin was pale, tinged blue at the lips and fingertips. Eyes closed, breathing shallow and uneven. Too cold. Far too cold. Something tightened in Ethan's chest. Not panic, recognition. He had seen this before. On mountains, in wreckage, in places where survival depended on seconds. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, controlled. "All right, stay with me." He moved quickly. The door shut behind him, sealing out the storm. He stripped off his jacket, wrapping it around the baby, creating warmth where there was none. He adjusted the fire, feeding it dry wood until the flames grew stronger, brighter. Behind him, the mother dog moved. Not closer, not farther. She positioned herself near the door, body angled outward, as if guarding the cabin itself. The puppy curled against her side, pressing into her warmth. Ethan noticed everything. The way her ears flicked toward the outside, the way her eyes tracked his movements, the way she did not interfere. Trust, heavy, unspoken, absolute. He worked fast. Blankets, heat, improvised care. Every action precise, every second measured. Minutes passed. Then, something changed. The baby's breathing steadied, slightly. Color returned, faint but visible. Ethan let out a slow breath. He hadn't realized he'd been holding it. He sat back slightly, still holding the child. And for the first time, he looked at the dog again. Really looked. There was no fear in her eyes, no confusion, only focus, expectation. As if she had completed one part of a task and was waiting for him to complete the rest. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the cabin, something had shifted, something irreversible. Ethan looked down at the baby in his arms, then back at the dog. And in that moment, he understood something he couldn't explain. This wasn't chance. This wasn't an accident. This was a choice. And somehow, he had been chosen. The fire needed to be stronger. Ethan moved with controlled urgency, one hand steady beneath the newborn's back, the other feeding dry logs into the stove. Flames climbed quickly, casting flickering light across the cabin walls, pushing back the cold that had seeped deep into everything: wood, air, skin. The baby's breathing was still shallow, too shallow. Ethan adjusted his grip, bringing the small body closer to his chest, using his own warmth as a barrier. The child weighed almost nothing. That, more than anything, unsettled him. He had carried injured men twice this weight through snow and wreckage, had fought to keep them alive long enough for rescue. But this was different. This was a life that had no defense at all. "Stay with me," he muttered, voice low, steady. He laid the child carefully on the table near the stove, stripping off his outer flannel shirt and folding it into layers. Improvised insulation. His movements were efficient, practiced, shaped by years of field training where hesitation cost lives. But beneath that precision, something else moved, something less controlled. Memory. Emily Cole. The name surfaced without warning. Emily had been a nurse. Not the kind who rushed or panicked, but the kind who slowed everything down. Early 30s when Ethan met her, with soft auburn hair usually tied into a loose knot, strands always escaping no matter how often she fixed it. Her eyes had been warm, green, steady, the kind that held attention without demanding it. She had been smaller than him, slim, but grounded in a way that made people listen when she spoke. She had once told him, half smiling, that saving lives wasn't about strength. It was about patience. He hadn't understood that then. Now he did. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing the memory back just enough to function. Focus. He reached for a small metal container from the shelf, powdered emergency milk, old but sealed. He poured water into a pot, setting it near the fire, watching the surface tremble as heat built. Behind him, the dog shifted, not toward him, toward the door. Ethan glanced back briefly. The German Shepherd had settled into position just inside the entrance, her body angled outward, head slightly lowered, ears alert. Snow clung to her coat, melting slowly in the rising warmth, but she didn't shake it off, didn't relax. She was guarding. The puppy remained pressed against her side, smaller now in the light, his legs tucked beneath him, trembling less than before, but still uncertain. His eyes followed Ethan's movements carefully, absorbing, learning, trusting, because the larger dog did. Ethan noticed the details without thinking, the discipline in the mother, the dependency in the pup. A structure. Not random. The water warmed. Not boiling, just enough. He tested it against his wrist the way Emily had shown him years ago, a habit he hadn't used since she was gone. Not too hot, she had said once, guiding his hand. Too much heat can be just as dangerous. He poured the mixture slowly, soaking a clean cloth, then lifted the baby again, carefully. He brought the cloth to the infant's mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a weak movement. The baby's lips parted slightly, instinct taking over where strength could not. Small, uneven swallows followed. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest again. Not fear, something sharper. Relief. He kept the pace slow, controlled. Too fast could choke. Too little would not be enough. Every movement measured. Minutes passed. The child responded. Breathing steadied, barely, but enough to notice. The faint blue tint at the fingertips began to fade, replaced by a fragile hint of color. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Across the room, the dog was watching him. Not casually, intently. Her eyes tracked every motion, every adjustment, every shift in the baby's condition. There was no confusion in her expression, no uncertainty. Just focus, expectation. As if she understood exactly what was happening, and was waiting for the outcome. Ethan met her gaze for a brief second. Something passed between them, unspoken. Then he looked back down at the child. "Still here," he said quietly. "That's enough for now." He adjusted the blankets again, creating a small enclosure near the stove, close enough for heat, far enough to avoid risk. He tested the air with his hand, moving it back and forth until it felt right. Precision, routine, control, things he understood. But as he worked, his mind drifted again, uninvited. Emily, sitting at a kitchen table years ago, laughing softly when he failed to wrap a simple bandage correctly. The way she had taken his hands, corrected them patiently, never making him feel inadequate. The way she believed, firmly, that people like him weren't meant to live alone forever. She had been wrong, or maybe. Ethan stopped the thought before it finished. The fire cracked sharply, pulling him back. The baby stirred, a small sound, not distress, just movement. Ethan leaned forward immediately, placing 2 fingers gently against the child's chest, feeling the rhythm, slow but steady. He stayed like that for a moment longer than necessary, confirming, grounding. Behind him, the puppy shifted, letting out a soft whine. The sound was higher, uncertain. The mother responded instantly, not with movement, but with a subtle shift of her body, pressing closer, creating contact. Reassurance. Ethan watched it from the corner of his eye. Then he did something he hadn't expected. He stood, crossed the room slowly, and crouched a short distance from the dog. Not too close, respecting space. "You brought her here," he said quietly. The dog didn't move, didn't blink, but her ears flicked slightly, acknowledging the sound. Ethan studied her more carefully now. 4, maybe 5 years old. Strong build, no visible injuries. Coat maintained, not wild, not abandoned. This was a trained animal, or had been. "Not a coincidence," he murmured. The puppy shifted again, inching forward slightly before stopping, unsure of the boundary. His movements were clumsy, hesitant, but determined in a way that mirrored the larger dog. Ethan noticed that, too. He stood slowly, returned to the table. The baby's breathing remained steady, better than before. Not safe yet, but closer. Outside, the storm continued to press against the cabin, but its sound felt distant now, muted by something inside the room that hadn't been there before. Purpose. Ethan sat down in the chair beside the table, not relaxing, not fully resting, but allowing himself a moment of stillness. The child slept. The dog watched. The fire held, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan realized that the silence he had built his life around was no longer empty. It was occupied. Morning came without warmth. The storm had passed, but the cold remained, sharp, dry, absolute. Light filtered through the trees in pale strips, revealing a landscape remade by the night. Snow lay deep and untouched, smoothing every surface into something deceptively calm. Ethan stood at the doorway of the cabin, one hand resting against the frame, eyes scanning the tree line. Behind him, the baby slept. Not strong, not safe, but alive. That was enough, for now. He had checked her twice already, breathing steady, skin warmer, wrapped carefully in layers near the stove. The fire was stable, the room held heat. He stepped outside. The air bit immediately, but it was clean now, no longer violent. Sound carried again, and something else came with it. Stillness. Not the quiet he had chosen for himself, but a different kind. The kind that followed disruption. Behind him, the German shepherd moved. Ethan heard it before he turned, the soft crunch of paws against packed snow. When he glanced back, she was already outside, standing a few feet away, posture different from the night before. Less guarded, more directed, her head angled slightly toward the trees, waiting. Ethan watched her for a moment. "You're not done," he said quietly. The dog didn't react to the words, but she turned and began walking. Not fast, not hesitant, deliberate. Ethan hesitated only once, briefly glancing back toward the cabin. The door remained open just enough. Warmth still inside. The baby secure. He made a decision. Then he followed. The snow was deep, but not impossible. His boots broke through the surface with each step, leaving clear impressions behind. The dog moved more efficiently, choosing a path that required less force, conserving energy. Another detail, not random. They moved through the trees in silence. The forest felt different now, open but not empty. Ethan's senses adjusted automatically, reading small changes, broken branches, subtle depressions, shifts in snow that didn't match the wind's pattern. Then he saw the first sign. Tracks. Not animal. Human. Boot prints. Ethan slowed immediately. His posture changed, slightly lower, weight balanced, steps quieter. Old instincts. The tracks cut through the snow at an angle deeper than his own. Whoever made them had been moving fast, running possibly. The stride length was inconsistent, uneven pressure, not controlled movement, not planned, fleeing. Ethan crouched, brushing a gloved hand lightly across the edge of one print. Fresh, less than 12 hours, during the storm. He looked ahead. The dog had stopped. She stood near a small clearing, body still, head lowered, waiting. Ethan approached carefully, and then he saw her. The woman lay partially buried beneath a thin layer of snow, as if the storm had tried to erase her but failed. Her body was curled slightly inward, one arm drawn close to her chest. Protective, even at the end. Ethan moved closer, each step measured. She was young, mid-20s, maybe younger. Her dark hair had come loose from beneath a knit cap, strands frozen against her cheek. Her skin carried a faint olive tone beneath the cold, now pale, almost translucent. Her features were delicate but defined. High cheekbones, narrow jawline, lips slightly parted as if caught between breath and silence. Her clothing was worn but layered intentionally. Not careless, not lost. Prepared. But not enough. Ethan knelt beside her. He didn't touch her immediately. He observed first. Hands positioned near her torso, not reaching outward, not defensive. Holding something. Or had been. His gaze shifted. Near her chest, partially shielded beneath her coat, was a small, folded piece of paper. Ethan removed his glove slowly, carefully. He reached for it. The paper was stiff from the cold, but intact. He unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, rushed, but clear enough. Protect her. They're watching. Ethan read it twice, then once more. His jaw tightened slightly. Not fear, recognition. He had seen messages like this before, not in forests, not in snow, but in places where people ran out of time, where decisions were made in seconds, where survival meant passing responsibility forward. He folded the paper again, slower this time. Then he looked back at the woman. "You made it this far," he said quietly. His voice carried no judgment, only acknowledgement. Behind him, the dog moved closer, not to him, to her. She lowered her head slightly, pausing beside the body. No sound, no movement beyond that. Stillness, respect. Ethan noticed that. Then his attention shifted again. The ground, the tracks. More of them now, not just hers. He stood slowly, scanning the area. Multiple sets, at least 2 other individuals. He moved a few steps outward, following the pattern. These tracks were different, heavier, more consistent, controlled. Not fleeing, pursuing. Ethan's breathing slowed. His mind began assembling the pieces. The woman had been running, carrying the baby, during a storm. Not lost, not wandering, escaping. The others followed. Distance closed. Something happened here. He crouched again near a disturbed patch of snow. Scuff marks, a shift in weight, a brief struggle, small but real. Then, nothing. No drag marks, no additional disturbance, which meant they didn't take her. They lost her, or chose not to continue. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. They're watching. Not past tense, present. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, but that meant nothing. People who knew terrain like this didn't move unless necessary. They waited, observed, calculated. Ethan felt something settle beneath his ribs. Cold, familiar. Not fear. Focus. He looked back at the dog, at the woman, at the path behind them leading to the cabin. Then he understood something clearly. This wasn't over. Not even close. He reached down, removing his glove again. With careful, deliberate movement, he closed the woman's eyes. A small act, but necessary. "Got her to me," he said quietly. "That counts." The dog remained still. Ethan stood, unfolding the paper once more before placing it inside his jacket. Secure. Close. Then he stepped back. His gaze moved once more across the clearing, memorizing details. Angles, distances, patterns. Everything mattered now, because whatever had brought her here would come looking again. And this time, Ethan would be ready. By the time Ethan stepped back into the cabin, the silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. He closed the door behind him with care, brushing snow from his jacket before crossing the room. The baby remained where he had left her, wrapped in layered blankets near the stove. Her breathing was steady, fragile, but consistent. Ethan checked it instinctively, fingers resting lightly against her chest. Still there. Good. Across the room, the German shepherd, Raven, though he hadn't named her yet, had already repositioned herself near the door. Her posture had shifted again. Not resting, not guarding in a passive sense. Ready. Her ears angled forward, her body aligned toward the outside. Listening. Ethan noticed immediately. Something was wrong. Not visible, not yet, but present. He moved toward the window, wiping a thin layer of frost away with the back of his hand. The glass cleared just enough to reveal the slope beyond the cabin, and there it was. Movement. Two figures. Still distant, but approaching with purpose. Ethan stepped back slowly, his breathing controlled. His mind began calculating distances, timing, options. He crossed to the table, adjusting the baby's position slightly, pulling the blankets tighter. Then he stood near the door, waiting. The knock came 10 seconds later. Firm, measured, not hesitant, not lost. Ethan didn't open immediately. He let the silence stretch. Then, slowly, he unlatched the door and pulled it open, just enough. The first man stood directly in front of him. He was tall, around 6'2", with a broad, solid build that suggested strength without excess. His dark hair was hidden beneath a wool cap, but a thick, trimmed beard framed his jaw. His coat was black, heavy, and expensive-looking, despite the snow clinging to it. His eyes were pale gray, sharp, controlled, and observant in a way that didn't match the polite expression on his face. This was a man used to being listened to, used to being obeyed. "Morning," he said, voice smooth, practiced. "Name's Mark Evans." Ethan said nothing. Mark continued, unbothered. "We're looking for someone. My sister. She was traveling through this area during the storm, didn't make it to her destination." He paused just long enough to suggest concern. "She had a child with her." Behind him stood the second man, younger, late 20s, maybe early 30s, leaner, with a narrower face and unshaven jaw. His brown hair hung slightly over his forehead, damp from melted snow. His posture was less controlled, shifting weight from foot to foot, hands tucked deep into his jacket pockets. Restless. His eyes moved constantly, not meeting Ethan's, scanning past him, into the cabin, searching. "Luke," the younger man muttered, almost as an afterthought, as if the name didn't matter. Ethan registered everything. The tone, the timing, the lack of urgency. No one looking for family spoke like that. He leaned slightly against the doorframe, blocking more of the interior from view. "Haven't seen anyone," Ethan said calmly. Mark's gaze flickered, brief, controlled, toward the inside of the cabin, then back. "You sure?" he asked, still polite. "Storm like that, people get turned around, end up in places they don't expect." Ethan held his gaze. "Yeah," he said, "I'm sure." Behind him, the baby shifted, a small sound, barely audible, but enough. Luke's head snapped slightly toward the noise, too fast, too focused. Ethan saw it, and Raven did too. The dog stepped forward into full view. Her movement was silent, controlled, but unmistakable. She placed herself between Ethan and the men, her body rigid now, weight forward, muscles tight beneath her coat. A low growl built in her chest, not loud, but steady. Mark's eyes dropped briefly to her, calculating, measuring distance, risk. Ethan noticed something then. On Luke's wrist, just visible where his sleeve had shifted, a dark mark, a tattoo. Not large, but distinct. 3 interlocked lines forming a triangular pattern. Ethan had seen symbols like that before. Not identical, but close enough. Organized, not random. His mind filed it immediately. Luke seemed to realize too late that it was visible. He tugged his sleeve down, but the moment had already passed. Mark raised a hand slightly, not toward Ethan, but toward Luke. A signal. Subtle. Luke stilled. Mark's expression didn't change, but something behind it did. Less patience now. "Look," Mark said, tone still calm but thinner. "We're just trying to find family. If you've seen anything, anything at all, it'd be helpful." Ethan didn't respond right away. He let the silence work. Let it press. Men like this filled space when they felt it slipping. Luke shifted again. "Be a shame," he said, voice rougher now, less controlled. "If something happened to a kid out here." The words hung in the air. Not concern, a test. Ethan didn't react outwardly, but inside, something settled into place. These men weren't searching, they were confirming. Raven's growl deepened slightly, her ears pinned back just enough to signal escalation. Mark noticed. Of course he did. He glanced at the dog again, then back at Ethan. Recalculating. Ethan met his gaze directly now, letting just enough hardness show. "No one here," he said. "Road's dangerous. You should head back before it gets worse." Mark held his stare for a second longer. Then he smiled, thin, controlled. "Appreciate your time," he said. He stepped back, turning without another word. Luke hesitated half a beat, eyes flicking once more toward the cabin, before following. They walked away without looking back. But Ethan didn't move. He stood there, watching until they disappeared beyond the trees. Only then did he close the door. The bolt slid into place with a solid click. Raven's posture eased slightly, but not fully. She remained near the door, listening. Ethan turned back toward the room. The baby was still breathing, still alive. But everything had changed. He moved to the window again, scanning the snow. Tracks. Clear. Direct. Not wandering, not searching. They had come straight here, which meant they knew enough, and they would come back. Ethan stepped away slowly. His mind was already shifting, planning, calculating. The cabin was no longer a refuge. It was a target. The cabin felt smaller after they left, not physically, but in the way danger changed space. Ethan stood in the center of the room, listening, not to the storm this time, but to what wasn't there. No voices, no footsteps, no movement beyond the trees. But silence like this wasn't safety. It was a pause. And pauses meant time. Time to act, or time to be caught unprepared. He moved without hesitation. The shift had already happened the moment the men turned away. This place was no longer defensible. He crossed to the table, checking the baby again. Her breathing remained shallow but steady, her skin warmer now beneath the layers of blankets and his jacket. She stirred faintly as his hand adjusted the fabric around her, her small fingers curling weakly against the cloth. "Still holding," he murmured. "Good, but not enough." He turned toward the shelves, pulling down supplies with precise efficiency. Dried food, water canteens, medical kit, limited but usable. Extra blankets, rope, flashlight. Each item placed on the table in a tight, organized line. No wasted movement, no wasted thought. Behind him, Raven watched. She had shifted position again, now closer to the center of the room, not guarding the door anymore, but tracking Ethan's actions. Her posture remained alert, but there was something else beneath it now. Readiness. Understanding. As if she recognized the change in direction. The puppy stayed near her side, but not as still as before. He moved more now, small, uncertain steps, testing the space. His legs were too long for his body, his balance uneven, but there was determination in the way he followed the larger dog's movements. Ethan noticed that. "You're not staying," he said quietly, more to himself than to them. The words hung in the air. He hadn't spoken like that in a long time. Hadn't made decisions that affected more than himself. He turned away from the supplies and walked to the far corner of the cabin. There, against the wall, hung an old pack, worn but intact. He pulled it down, the weight of it familiar in his hands. Too familiar. For a second, his grip tightened. Memory again. Different place, different cold. The roar of rotors overhead. Voices in his headset. Coordinates being shouted over wind and static. The moment control slipped just slightly, and everything after that became impact, fire, silence. Ethan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Focus. He packed the bag methodically, distributing weight with care. Essentials only. No room for mistakes. No room for excess. Because speed would matter. Distance would matter more. He moved back to the table, lifting the baby carefully. She stirred again, a faint sound escaping her lips, but didn't wake. He adjusted her position against his chest, wrapping her securely in layers, testing the hold. Stable. He reached for a length of cloth and secured it around his shoulders, creating a makeshift harness. Tight enough to hold, loose enough to adjust. He checked it twice, then once more. Behind him, the puppy took a few steps forward, closer than before. He stopped halfway between Raven and Ethan, ears slightly forward, head tilted. Curious. Watching. Ethan looked down at him. "You won't keep up," he said. The puppy didn't understand the words, but he stepped forward anyway. Raven moved immediately, placing herself between them, not blocking, but guiding. Her body angled toward Ethan, her gaze steady, then shifting briefly toward the door. "Go." That was what it said. Ethan understood. He grabbed the remaining supplies, securing them in place, then moved toward the door. He paused only once, glancing around the cabin. The chair, the stove, the marks in the wood where time had passed without meaning. He had built this place to disappear, to remove himself from everything that came before. And now, he was leaving it behind. Not destroyed, not lost, but no longer enough. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and immediate. The sky had cleared, but the ground remained deep with snow. The trail leading away from the cabin was narrow, partially covered, but visible enough. Ethan stepped outside. The weight of the baby against his chest grounded him instantly. Different from before, every step now carried consequence beyond himself. Raven followed, moving into position at his side without command. The puppy hesitated for a fraction of a second at the threshold, looking back once, just once, at the cabin. Then he stepped out. The snow slowed him. Each movement required force, control. He adjusted his pace quickly, finding a rhythm that balanced speed with stability. Too fast and he would tire. Too slow and they would lose time. Behind him, the puppy struggled at first. His legs sank deeper, his steps uneven. But he didn't stop. He adjusted, small corrections, faster movements, learning with each step. Ethan glanced back once, then again. Not concern, assessment. The puppy wasn't falling behind. Not yet. Ahead, the forest opened slightly, the trail widening just enough to allow better movement. Ethan angled his path away from the most direct route. Not straight, never straight. Straight lines were easy to follow. He moved instead through denser ground, where branches forced irregular patterns, where tracks broke and overlapped. Harder to read, harder to track. His mind worked automatically now, mapping terrain, calculating angles, predicting movement. The men would return. Of that, he was certain. And when they did, they would follow the simplest path first, which meant he needed to become something harder to follow. The baby shifted slightly against him. Ethan adjusted his hold without breaking stride. "Almost there," he said quietly. He didn't know if that was true, but it didn't matter. The words weren't for certainty. They were for movement. Raven moved slightly ahead now, taking the lead. She stopped occasionally, looking back to confirm he was following, then continuing. Guiding. Not random. Never random. Ethan let her, for now, because direction mattered less than distance. And distance was the only thing keeping them alive. By the time the trees began to thin, Ethan could feel the difference. Not in the air, it was still cold, still biting, but in the space around him. The forest no longer pressed in from every side. The ground sloped more gently, and the trail beneath his boots widened into something closer to a path than a guess. Civilization wasn't visible yet, but it was near. Ethan adjusted the baby against his chest without stopping. Her weight had shifted slightly over the past hour. Not heavier, but more present. Her breathing, though still fragile, had stabilized enough that each rise and fall felt less like a countdown and more like continuity. He didn't relax. He didn't allow himself to. Behind him, the puppy stumbled again, catching himself quickly this time. His movements had changed since they left the cabin. Less erratic, more deliberate. He was learning, adapting with each step. His small frame was still shaking, but there was stubbornness in the way he pushed forward. Ethan glanced back briefly, still keeping up. Ahead, Raven slowed. Her pace changed first, then her posture. Her ears shifted, angling toward something beyond Ethan's hearing. She stopped completely, her body still, her focus fixed ahead. Ethan froze instantly. He lowered his center of gravity slightly, shifting his weight without thinking. His eyes moved across the open stretch of land in front of them. And then he saw her. A figure emerged from the edge of the clearing, a woman. She moved carefully across the snow, a bundle of firewood balanced against her hip. Her steps were steady, measured, not hurried, not careless. She wore a thick winter coat, practical and worn, with a knit hat pulled low over her head. Strands of dark blonde hair had escaped, brushing against her cheek as she moved. She saw him at the same moment and stopped. The distance between them held. Neither moved. Ethan studied her. Mid-30s, maybe 32 or 33. Average height, but carried herself with a quiet strength that made her seem more grounded than she was tall. Her build was lean, shaped more by endurance than muscle. Her face was sharp in the cold light. Fair skin, slightly weathered by exposure, with eyes that didn't panic or retreat, but observed, measured, careful, not naive. Her posture shifted slightly, not defensive, but aware. "Didn't expect to see anyone out here," she said, her voice calm, steady, not loud, not soft, neutral. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He watched her. Then he stepped forward, just enough to show intention without closing distance too quickly. "Same," he said. Her gaze moved, not to him, but to the baby secured against his chest. Something in her expression changed. Not fear, not suspicion. Recognition. Concern. She adjusted the bundle of wood slightly, shifting its weight. "That child shouldn't be out here," she said. Not a question, a fact. Ethan nodded once. "Wasn't by choice." That was all he offered. She accepted it, not because it explained anything, but because she didn't need it to. Her eyes moved again, this time to the dogs. Raven stood still, watching her closely. Not aggressive, not relaxed, evaluating. The puppy hovered just behind Ethan now, half hidden, his ears forward but uncertain. The woman lowered herself slightly, not crouching fully, just enough to change her posture. Non-threatening. She extended one hand slowly, palm down, stopping well short of reaching distance. "I'm Claire," she said. Claire Dawson. The name fit her. Ethan filed it without comment. He nodded once. "Ethan." She didn't ask for more, didn't press. Her gaze returned to the baby. "May I?" she asked, gesturing slightly. Ethan hesitated, only for a second. Then he stepped closer, adjusting the cloth binding carefully before allowing her a clearer look. Claire moved in with practiced ease. Her hands were steady as she gently brushed back a layer of fabric, exposing just enough to see the baby's face. Her touch was precise, controlled, not hesitant, but not intrusive either. This wasn't new to her. Her eyes softened, but not weakly. There was depth in that softness, something held back. "She's been exposed," Claire said quietly. "But she's responding. That's good." Ethan watched her. "You a doctor?" he asked. She shook her head slightly. "Veterinarian," she replied. "But physiology doesn't change that much when it comes to survival. Heat, hydration, breathing, it's the same principles." Her voice remained calm, measured. But there was something beneath it, something personal. Ethan noticed. Claire adjusted the blanket again, more securely this time. "She needs sustained warmth," she continued, "and monitoring. You've done enough to keep her alive this long, but she won't last another night like that." Ethan absorbed the words, not as criticism, as fact. "Town?" he asked. Claire nodded. "About 3 miles," she said. "Roads partially cleared. Church is open. People gather there during storms. Heat, supplies, communication." She paused, then added quieter, "I can help get her there." Ethan studied her again. Not her words, her posture, her eyes. No deception, no hesitation, just clarity. "Why?" he asked. Claire didn't answer immediately. Her gaze dropped briefly to the baby, then lifted again. "I lost a child," she said. Simple, direct, no detail, no embellishment, but enough. Ethan didn't ask more. He didn't need to. It explained the shift in her expression earlier, the way she moved, the way she spoke. Not sympathy, understanding. Raven stepped forward slightly, closer now, her nose lifted, testing the air near Claire. Claire didn't pull back, didn't react. She stayed still, let the dog decide. After a moment, Raven's posture eased, just slightly. Not acceptance, but allowance. Ethan noticed that. Important. Claire stood slowly, adjusting the weight of the firewood again. "I've got a place not far from here," she said. "We can stop, warm her properly before moving on. It's safer than pushing straight through." Ethan considered it. Time versus exposure. Risk versus stability. His mind ran through the variables quickly. Then he nodded. "Lead." Claire didn't smile, didn't hesitate. She turned, adjusting her path slightly off the main trail, moving with the same steady pace as before. Ethan followed. Raven moved beside him. The puppy kept close. And for the first time since leaving the cabin, Ethan felt something unfamiliar shift beneath the tension. Not relief, not yet, but something close. Trust. Not complete, not blind, but enough to move forward. Claire's place wasn't a house so much as a working outpost. It sat at the edge of a narrow service road, half buried in snow, but structurally solid, built low and reinforced against the mountain weather. A small wooden structure with an attached shed and a fenced enclosure partially hidden beneath drifts. Functional, practical, no excess. Ethan noticed all of that before he stepped inside. He always did. Claire pushed the door open first, setting the firewood down just inside before turning to clear space near the stove. The interior was warmer than the outside, though not by much. A single wood-burning heater glowed low in the corner, its heat steady but limited. "Bring her here," Claire said, already moving. Ethan stepped in, closing the door behind him quickly to seal out the cold. Raven entered immediately after, scanning the room before settling near the door again. The puppy followed last, shaking snow from his coat in uneven bursts. Claire worked without hesitation. She cleared the table, laying out blankets, then turned back to Ethan.
"Set her down, gently."
He did. The baby stirred faintly as he unwrapped the outer layer, exposing just enough for Claire to assess her condition. Claire's movements were precise, efficient, practiced, not rushed, but not slow either. She checked breathing first, then temperature, then responsiveness.
"Still stable,"
she said.
"but she needs consistent heat now, not just bursts. You got her through the worst part."
Ethan said nothing. He watched. Claire moved to a cabinet, pulling out a small kit. Clean cloths, a thermometer, a bottle with measured markings. Not hospital grade, but maintained with care.
"This place used to be a backup clinic,"
she said without looking at him.
Mostly for livestock injuries, but it works.
She paused, then added quietly.
Sometimes it has to.
Ethan understood. Not everything needed explanation. Raven shifted again. Ethan noticed immediately. The dog's posture tightened, not aggressive, but alert in a different way than before. Her head angled slightly toward the window, ears forward, body still. Listening. Ethan moved without thinking. He stepped toward the window, wiping away condensation with his sleeve, and saw them. Tracks. Fresh. Cutting across the snow in a direct line toward the cabin behind them. Too direct. Too precise. "They're back," Ethan said. Claire looked up instantly. "Who?" "Two men," Ethan replied, not looking. "Hunting." Claire didn't ask more questions. Her expression changed, subtle but clear. Focus replacing concern. "Inside or out?" she asked. "Not here yet," Ethan said, "but close." Claire nodded once. "Then we don't wait." She moved quickly now, adjusting the baby's position, securing the blankets tighter. "We need to move her again. There's a church in town. Heat, people, phones. Safer than here." Ethan didn't argue. He didn't hesitate. He began gathering supplies again, faster this time. Less selection, more necessity. Behind him, the puppy let out a soft sound. Not fear, alert. Raven responded instantly, stepping toward the door. Then stopping. Her body angled, not toward the road, but slightly off to the side. Ethan followed her line of sight. Nothing visible, but that didn't mean nothing was there. He understood immediately. "They're splitting," he said. Claire glanced at him. "What?" "They won't come straight," Ethan explained. "Not after earlier. They'll circle, cut off options." His voice was calm, controlled. The same tone he had used years ago when coordinating movement under pressure. Claire saw it, recognized it. "Then we don't take the road," she said. Ethan nodded. "Exactly." He secured the baby again, tightening the wrap across his chest. Stable, protected. Then he turned back to Claire. "You know another way?" Claire hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "There's an old logging trail behind the ridge," she said. "Not used much anymore. Hard to follow if you don't know it." Ethan didn't need more. Good. Raven moved first. Not toward the door this time, toward the back, guiding. Ethan followed, Claire just behind him. They exited through a secondary door, stepping into deeper snow, but denser cover. Trees closed in tighter here, branches heavier, visibility reduced. Better. Ethan adjusted his pace quickly. Slower now, more controlled. Tracks would matter. Patterns would matter more. Behind them, the puppy struggled again, but less than before. He stayed close, following Raven's path exactly, placing his paws where hers had been. Learning, adapting. Ethan noticed. Ahead, Raven stopped suddenly, completely still. Ethan froze. Then he heard it, faint, distant. Voices, carried by the cold air. Male, two of them, not close, but not far enough. Ethan's mind mapped it instantly. Distance, direction, timing. "They're ahead," he said quietly. Claire's expression tightened. "So we turn?" Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "We disappear." He moved off the trail, not randomly, deliberately. He angled them into thicker brush, where branches forced irregular movement, where snow broke differently under weight. Harder to read, harder to follow. He reached down, dragging a fallen branch lightly across their previous tracks, disrupting the pattern just enough. Not perfect, but enough to slow pursuit. Raven adjusted instantly, mirroring his change without command. Claire followed, watching carefully, learning as they moved. The voices faded, then disappeared. Ethan didn't stop. Not yet. Not until distance meant something again. Only then did he slow. He glanced back once. Nothing visible. But that didn't matter. What mattered was time. And they had bought some. For now. By the time the trees began to thin again, the sound reached them first. Distant, faint, but unmistakable. Sirens. Ethan slowed, his body reacting before his thoughts caught up. He shifted his weight slightly, adjusting his stance, listening more carefully now. The sound carried through the cold air in broken waves, rising and falling with the terrain. Not random. Organized. Claire heard it too. "They made it out," she said quietly. Ethan didn't respond immediately. He scanned the area one more time, eyes moving across the edges of the clearing ahead. No movement, no voices, no signs of the men. But that didn't mean they were gone, only that they had lost control. Raven moved first. Her posture changed again, not alert and warning, but forward, guiding. She stepped out of the denser brush into a narrow opening that led toward the road. Ethan followed, Claire just behind him. The puppy stayed close now, no longer lagging, his movements more confident, his small frame pushing forward with quiet determination. As they reached the edge of the road, the sound of engines joined the sirens. Vehicles. Multiple. Ethan stepped out into the open and stopped. 2 police trucks were parked at an angle across the road, their lights flashing against the snow. A third vehicle, older, unmarked, sat just behind them. Doors opened. Men stepped out. One of them moved forward immediately. He was in his early 40s, tall and solidly built, with a square jaw and short cropped brown hair touched with gray at the edges. His uniform was standard issue, but worn in a way that suggested years of use rather than neglect. His eyes were steady, alert, but not aggressive. Professional. Grounded. "Easy," he said, raising one hand slightly. Not in command, but reassurance. "You're safe now." Ethan didn't move right away. He watched. Measured. The man approached slowly, stopping at a respectful distance. "Officer Daniel Brooks," he said. "County Sheriff's Department." Ethan nodded once. "Ethan Cole." Brooks's gaze shifted briefly, to the baby, to Claire, to the dogs, taking everything in quickly. Then back to Ethan. "We've got 2 suspects in custody," Brooks said. "Picked them up about a mile from here. Tried to double back when they lost your trail." Ethan felt the tension in his chest shift, not disappear, but change. "Alive?" he asked. Brooks nodded. "For now." There was something in the way he said it, controlled but edged. Claire stepped forward slightly. "The baby," she said. "She needs proper care. Now." Brooks turned his attention to her, his expression softening just enough. "We've got medical on the way," he said. "But if you've stabilized her this long, she's got a fighting chance." Claire nodded, not relieved, but satisfied. Another figure approached from behind the vehicles. Older, late 40s, maybe early 50s. Lean, with sharp features and thinning gray hair. He wore a dark coat instead of a uniform, but his posture carried authority without needing it stated. His eyes were narrow, observant, the kind that didn't miss detail. He stopped beside Brooks. "Detective Alan Pierce," Brooks said briefly. "County unit." Pierce gave a small nod. "Mr. Cole," he said, "we're going to need a statement. But first things first. Thank you." His tone was calm, measured, not emotional, but sincere. Ethan didn't respond, not to that. Instead, he shifted the baby slightly, adjusting his hold. "She needs to get inside," he said. Pierce nodded once. "Agreed." The situation moved quickly after that. A medic unit arrived, 2 responders stepping out with equipment. One of them, a woman in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled tightly into a bun, moved with immediate purpose. Her name tag read Karen Mitchell. Her build was compact but strong, her movements efficient, practiced. Years in emergency care showed in the way she assessed the baby without hesitation. "She's hypothermic but responsive," Karen said after a quick check. "You did good." Ethan said nothing. He handed the baby over carefully, slower than necessary, as if the transfer meant something more than just procedure. Claire watched closely, her hands still slightly raised, as if ready to step back in if needed. Raven remained near Ethan, her posture relaxed for the first time since the night began. Not fully at ease, but no longer braced for threat. The puppy sat beside her, watching everything with wide, alert eyes. Time passed. Statements were taken. Details were shared. Ethan gave only what was necessary. Facts, observations, nothing more. The rest would come later. By the time the sun began to lower behind the trees, the vehicles had thinned. The immediate urgency had passed, replaced by controlled movement and quiet coordination. Claire stood beside him, her arms folded loosely against the cold. "They'll take her to the county hospital," she said. "Observation, paperwork, all of it." Ethan nodded. "I know." A pause, then, "You going to walk away?" she asked. Not accusing, not pushing, just asking. Ethan looked ahead, toward the road, toward the fading light, then back toward the forest. The cabin, the place he had built to disappear. He thought of it differently now, not as an escape, but as something unfinished. "No," he said. Claire didn't smile, but something in her posture eased. Weeks passed. Snow melted slowly, retreating from the ground inch by inch. The air softened, carrying new sounds, water, wind through branches, life returning in small ways. Ethan stood on the porch of the cabin, watching it happen. The place had changed. Not in structure, but in purpose. Inside, the fire still burned, but now it warmed more than one life. The baby, no longer just a fragile presence, had grown stronger. Her cheeks filled out, her breathing steady, her movements more certain. He had named her Hope. Not because it sounded right, but because it was. Raven lay near the door, her eyes half closed but aware of everything. Her coat had regained its shine, her posture no longer tense, but grounded. The puppy, Scout, moved constantly now, his legs finely matching his body, his energy impossible to contain. Claire visited often, at first for the baby, then for other reasons. She moved through the cabin easily now, her presence natural, unforced. The space adjusted around her without resistance. Ethan noticed that, more than he expected. One morning she stood beside him on the porch, watching Scout chase his own shadow across the yard. "You kept her," she said. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." Claire glanced at him briefly. "No regrets?" Ethan looked down at Hope, cradled securely in his arms, then back out at the mountains. "No," he said. And this time, it was true. Sometimes miracles don't come with noise. They don't arrive with light breaking through the sky or voices calling from above. Sometimes they come quietly, in the form of a choice. A choice to open a door when it would be easier to stay inside. A choice to protect someone who cannot protect themselves. A choice to love again, even when the past has taught you how painful that can be. Ethan didn't just save a child that night. He found something he thought he had lost forever. Purpose. And maybe that's the real message of this story, that no matter how far you run, no matter how much silence you build around your life, God has a way of placing something, or someone, right in front of you at the exact moment you need it most. Not to test you, but to remind you who you really are. So now I want to ask you something. What would you have done if you were in Ethan's place? Would you have opened that door, or would you have walked away? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one of them. And if this story touched you, even just a little, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay with us, because the next story might just change the way you see the world.